You know, I've always heard about the Yakuza series for a long time, but it never really interested me. I don't know why, because sometimes you see a game series and you think, okay, cool. I know that's a shallow reason for why it took me so long to get into these games, but hey, only human, sometimes skeleton, and other times I'm a furry. Ah, the internet is such a wonderful place. And it's not like I haven't had any interaction with the series. I actually remember seeing Kiryu and Majima in Project Cross Zone 2, as they were playable characters in that game. Granted, when I played the game, I had more thoughts about the game that kind of took precedence in my head. Ooh, Phoenix Wright!
Bonk, 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 no!
Okay, sorry about that. I just have a thing for beautifully pixelated attorneys.
What the fuck is wrong? Gay!
But late last year, I decided that I'd bite the bullet and get myself invested in one of the games, and luckily for me, it was on sale at the time. A little game known to the world as Yakuza 0. Okay, yeah, this is an awesome game. And now that I've spoiled my thoughts on said game, you're more than welcome to jump off the video, but for those who will stay, I'll gladly explain my thoughts on the game. Even though, taking one look on the internet, you already know why people love this game. I don't have to tell you that the game is good. Pretty much everyone universally thinks that this game is... Wait a minute. 2 stars?! Are you people freaking crazy, you stupid flaming... So what's the point of me writing this script, voicing what you're hearing, and paying an editor a ton of money because I'm too lazy to do the actual editing myself? Yakuza 0 isn't some obscure game, at least not now. Hell, just looking on the net for 2 seconds you'll find people have memed the hell out of Baka Mitai, and not gonna lie, I love the song, but you people are really killing this meme!
Under the assumption that it wasn't already dead to begin with.
And now that I've thoroughly wasted yours, mine, and my editor's time with this page of dialogue, let's actually get into the game that I've fallen in love with, forcing me to make the mistake of actually existing and wizarding away hundreds of hours of my life. Hi, I'm Mangakamen, and welcome to my sad, miserable existence. I think it's safe to say most of you who clicked on this video have already left a comment wondering what the hell the title is about. But don't think about that. We're back in the 80s! Back in a time where Ronald Reagan was the president of the United States. Star Wars didn't suck! And people were doing crazy shit to their hair wasn't just something a delinquent might do. In the year of 1988, we followed 2 characters, Kazuma Kiryu and Goro Majima. And it's at this point I tell you guys this is my first Yakuza game, at least properly. I mean, I remember playing a Yakuza game a long time ago, but... I kind of force-wiped those memories from my brain a long time ago. Maybe I'll go back once I have a better foothold in the series, but regardless of the mass horde of brainless brainlets, the fact I'm starting with the prequel of the story is very intriguing. Yakuza 0 is actually the 6th entry in the Yakuza series, and while I'm sure I'm missing a ton of context that later entries in the game most likely deliver, I think this is the best possible option for me to start with this in the series. You see, the biggest issue with prequel stories is that, well, the prequel already has a predestined outcome. So whenever there's a danger or the threat of death over the main characters, it becomes hollow. Take, for example, Life is Strange Before the Storm, a game that I have a lot of a disdain for. So, incoming harsh opinion, whenever you see a scene like this... it falls extremely flat, because the characters who are in trouble have different fates. This example right here, I know for a fact that the girl who got stabbed, Rachel Amber, will not die here. Why? because she dies specifically at the hands of another character in the first game.
Objection!
So basically, spoilers suck.
Oh. Right. Editor, slap on some sort of disclaimer, and I guess make me look like a jackass at the same time.
One fucking job, but you couldn't fucking do that!
Regardless of me talking about a garbage prequel stories always have uphill battles to go against, because we already know where our characters are going at the start of the first game. And while Yakuza 0 does face that problem, it manages to bypass that issue by a simple matter. And that's because it actually molds the characters and shows us how they got into the past of becoming the characters they are in the games that take place later in the timeline. It's just that this game takes place in 1988, the greatest year of all time in my opinion. Gushing about the 80s and how metal they were aside, Kiryu and Majima are two characters that run counter to each other in this game, and yet have aspects about themselves that people seem to really enjoy. So wanting to see how a character who acts like this in the most recent of series,
こいつはおごりや。たんともいい。ありがとうございます。私はこの酒を一度浴びるように飲んでみたかったのですが。
it can really interest people. The game has certainly gotten my attention since it gets me wondering how the hell did that happen? With Majima, that's a good thing, but what about Kiryu, the main protagonist for this entire series? Well, according to an interview with two producers at Sega, Scott Strickhart and Sam Mullen, Strickhart described Kiryu as such.
I would say that Kiryu has always had this straight man trait. Tough but honorable, and keeps to himself a bit.
I certainly can see that in the Yakuza 0, and I can see that from looking over the series that there is quite a bit of difference. Hell, the series creator Toshiro Nagoshi described Kiryu akin to that of James Bond.
Kiryu is a super cool and masculine guy. But since he's a well-established character with a specific personality, there are things he would and wouldn't do.
From that description, I can see that Kiryu himself does change from the prequel to the pre-established titles in the series, especially considering that Kiryu is a bit more reckless in this game than one would expect. And even... wait a minute. Am I fighting a fucking bear? And I'm winning?! Bare knuckle bruising aside, seeing these two characters evolve from this into the two people from games that take place in a more modern time is enough to draw in the crowd. And for most of the time, Yakuza 0 doesn't try to fake out scenes with the characters in order to mess with the audience's emotions. All Yakuza 0 does is tell you how these people got to where they were. They explain the events, and at the same time poke fun at their own futures. It's a story that, while for all intents and purposes is supposed to be taken completely serious, also allows the audience to breathe and allow the audience to enjoy the game at their own pace and not get bogged down with the story if they feel like it. By the way, I think it's pretty obvious, but I'm trying not to spoil as much of this game as I can. I really enjoyed the story and its zany antics, and I think you guys should go out and play this game. Do it. You won't regret it, unless you're a contrarian. That was a joke, by the way.
This is the part where you're supposed to laugh! You stupid motherfucker!
What I will say when it comes to the story is that these two characters start off both being completely separate and have no connections to each other, but you begin to see the threads slowly interlocking and weaving the two characters together into fate. Also, there are some pretty funny moments with the story. Another reason why I think the story is able to be so good is due to the sub-stories that you can access throughout the campaign, and frankly they're optional to do, so if you don't want to do them, or you just want to continue the main story, you can just ignore them. But if you do so, you'll be ignoring some of the best writing in the game, as it's charming and funny, and you can see why it's part of the charm of the series. These are what actually got me to come back to the game again and again, especially considering how ridiculous they can be. Like getting a woman a pizza because you misinterpreted that she needs a visa. Finding some gargantuan middle schooler who is stealing people's pants. Saving a daughter from an evil cult. And meeting the best dollar store Michael Jackson ever. Although some of them are goofy, there are quite a few sub-stories that are quite serious, and probably one of my favorites comes from Majima's side. You see, there's a father who had to change his face through surgery because of an incident with the Yakuza, and had to leave his family to protect them. So he spends his time watching his son in the park, from afar. And, well, It's a story that really got me. The man just wanted to play catch with his son! I'm not saying all the sub-stories are as fleshed out as that. Some of them end up being really redundant and annoying, and some become fetch quests, requiring you to buy items or interact with the massive amount of mini-games in the game. But all the sub-stories do at least give you some sort of reward in the game, whether it be items or... chicken? Wait. Nugget the chicken is a business manager? What?! So let's talk about the combat of Yakuza 0, and I gotta say, it's varied. Now, to establish something early on, you're not a character like Dante or Bayonetta. Well, mostly where you cycle through multiple weapons or such to rack up huge scores and combos. While you're not a witch or a half demon or half angel, you don't get to pull off sick jumps or flips. Majima, into becoming a capoeira master aside, you're not playing a character with superpowers. Although I sort of can't make a case for it. The reason why I bring up these two games is because while you're not pulling out 360 jumps and blasting enemies with guns, Yakuza 0 actually does take a few notes from these games. One is the lock-on button. Now, if you're a scrub like me, who plays with a controller, in this game you push the R button, you can lock onto enemies so you can focus on attacks on specific enemies and bosses. It allows you to focus on them and pulling off your quick step, which is necessary if you want to have more control and direction. Thing is, you can fight without lock-on, and it's good against larger amount of enemies, since your attacks will generally have a wide range of attack and can hit a number of them, especially when you take in consideration the ability to pick up items to attack enemies with.
Watch out, watch out, watch out, watch out!
Granted, you need to use lock-on for specific moves such as countering, but if you don't use it, you can use the directional attacks, which, as the name implies, allows you to change the path of your attack in the middle of the combo, and can be very good when you're up against loads of enemies. But this isn't a game where you can just mash the square button. I mean, you can, but the combat's gonna get really repetitive in that regard, and you're gonna be getting an ass beating. Rush combos, as the name implies, allows you to do a combination of square and triangle to get some fun effects and animations. Most notably, you want to be able to get your enemy into the ground all the while feeling your heat bar. If you just continually mash the light attack, you're gonna have a harder time knocking down your enemies, which is something that you want to do, because the tougher fights you can get swarmed pretty easily, and it's better to have enemies eating pavement for a few moments to thin out any extra fodder. You can also grab your opponents. Not only will you be able to inflict a good chunk of damage to your opponent, but depending on your button choice, you can perform different kinds of throws and attacks. Take for example, in his basic style, the Brawler. Using the throw mechanic with it, you can deliver a flurry of punches, a single big hit, or just throw the enemy to the ground, and it varies depending on that style that you're using as well as the character playing as. And by using the L1 button, you can pull enemies while you're grappling them so you can get behind them. As a side note, don't rely too much on grabbing on the enemies, especially bosses, as it will get to a point where they're able to counter your grabs. So while the grabbing can get you some good damage and knock down an enemy, you can't always rely on it. As if this couldn't get more fleshed out, both Kiryu and Majima have multiple fighting styles, which you can swap between, for quite the variety of moves, each coming with their own strengths and limitations. For example, Kiryu's Brawler, Rush, and Beast fighting styles have their own spins to them. Brawler is the standard and can be pretty brutal. Rush focuses on speed and evasion, and Beast has a lot more power to it. Majima's include his Thug, Slugger, and Breaker styles. Thug is akin to Kiryu's Brawler, but Slugger is more weapon-based, and Breaker is, well... Okay, Breaker is the fucking shit! Each of these styles have their own abilities and create fun combinations, and you can switch between the styles between combat. There's also a fourth style that you can get later in the games, but as you can see, I think it's best that you guys enjoy those fighting styles on your own accord. Besides, I want to talk about them and how you can get to them later. In addition, as you go through the game, you can unlock more and more techniques, skills, and power-ups, whatever have you. You just need to have teachers teach you some moves, and you need a ton of cash in order to get the majority of these. So how do you get billions and billions of yen?
この金で
You just got pranked, bro!
We'll get to that. Since there's even more to talk about when it comes to combat. Yeah, we still got a ton more to talk about. And that's the heat actions. Heat actions are interesting to say the least. These are extremely powerful attacks that you can access when you see the prompt in the screen. And there's a lot of different heat actions that you can access depending on what you're doing, what style you're in, and your location. Is your opponent making an attack? Are you being grappled? Does the enemy have a sword and you've got brass knuckles equipped? Doing your part to end that which shall not be named? Need someone to replace Salt Bay? Did you get knocked down? And of course, politely disagreeing with people online. I've barely shown you a quarter of these, and I haven't even shown you any of Majima's heat actions.
So, I think I've already added enough crazy-ass over-the-top shit to this video. At least for now. So... speedrun time!
Not only do these things do massive amounts of damage, they're worth doing just to see the amazing fluid animation, and it's just as fun to see how many of you can do and what you can make work on them. They also encourage the player to get out of their usual routines and experiment with the combat so you can get access to more and more of these amazing animations, and it adds a lot of cinematic elements to the gameplay. After all, who doesn't want to take down goons in a style that can sometimes make Devil May Cry shed a tear? There are a limited number of heat actions when you start a game, but as I said, you can unlock more and more as you get progress through the game, which adds more tools to your arsenal of attacks. You will need to fill up the bars in the corner, the heat gauge, in order to perform these attacks. And the question had to be is, how do you get those bars full? I don't know, beats the hell out of me. I suppose you could down a crap ton of energy drinks, but it's more fun to beat up enemies. Little thing to note, there are quick time events in some of these, but it's worth to watch how these attacks can be brutal, amazing, or just comedic. But in case you don't want to use the heat action and want to use regular triangle attacks, hit the L2 button and poof! The heat action prompt will disappear. Then again...
But why? Why would you do that? Why would you do any of that?
And guess what? I'm still not done! One thing to mention about Yakuza 0 is that if you finish off an enemy, you'll get more money, especially with a heat action. So the game rewards you for beating up the baddies with these flashy moves. But hey, I'm talking about offensive capabilities. What about being defensive? Well, you've got a few options. The first is to block attacks, and depending on which fighting style you're going with, that'll change. Kiryu is a prime example of this. His brawler block will stop the damage from being inflicted. Meanwhile, his beast style will allow him to tank the hit so he can fill up the heat gauge. And his rush style allows him to dodge enemy attacks while standing still so he can move out of the way through bobbing and weaving and sidestepping. Speaking of dodging, it too is very viable, as you can use the dodge mechanic to get out of the way of enemy attacks and slip behind your opponents so you can land some powerful blows upon them. Dodging is a key aspect of the combat system that you need to use in order to fight some of the enemies in the game, especially bosses. There is one more aspect about the combat I want to cover because there's a counter system in the game, but it's a little tricky to pull off since it's something you can do depending on the character and what style they are in. The biggest issue I had myself with the counter system is that it takes some good timing just to get them right. But if that can be done, it's so satisfying to pull off. It's like when you're taking the time to learn the combos in a fighting game and you just get that surge of pleasure shot into your brain when you can do this. I know the latest Yakuza game has taken the route of RPGs and Judgment has adopted the form of combat, but I don't know. I think it's a bit disappointing that this very inventive combat system was transferred to a different series. Aside from the story and the combat, there's a lot you can do in Yakuza 0. Like, you know how some games have you play some mini games that can distract you from the main game, but ultimately aren't that enthralling? And don't get me wrong, sometimes the mini games can net you some fun perks at times. Which is how I think mini games should be done in expansive games. They either have to be fun or net you some sort of reward that can help you in the main content of the game. And luckily for me, Yakuza 0 does exactly that. And we're not talking about the small amount of minigames. No. There are a ton of minigames!
Oh, fuck.
Nico, it's Roman. Let's go bowling.
Like, if I were to go through everything you could do and explain their mechanics and such, it'd probably blow this video up to a couple of hours, and frankly, that would be a bit too much, and I'm sure my editor would want to hunt my blood down.
Do you speak English?
What I'll say about the games is that they're functional, and they can be fun if you know what you're doing. And infuriating when you realize you didn't read the minigame instructions right. Yeah, feel free to point and laugh. Shut up! Anyways, there are lots of mini-games in here to unpack, some of which could be their own games. They are that intricate. There's the casino with the gambling games, and they even have actual replicas of Sega arcade centers with real playable games in them. Most of them are fun and not very difficult. Karaoke and dancing minigames stood out to me the most. And I also enjoyed the UFO catcher, bowling, and telephone club minigames. These aren't even half of the games present in the game. I do, however, have one gripe about the game, and that's that the completion stuff is needlessly grindy. Like, there are completion points that you need to get by doing various actions in the game, which completing will get you some perks at a temple. One example is completing bars. You have to order drinks one by one, and in some minigames/encounters, you have to exit and re-enter buildings to progress things, which is a bit weird and feels archaic to me. But these things are something that you can do as they give you completion points and aren't really all that egregious if you ask me. But what are completion points, you may ask? Well, they're bonus points that can be acquired and give you even more abilities or items or such in the game for each character. They can range from getting more money, unlocking abilities, getting women to work in your club. They're fun little additions to the game that you can get for doing various things, such as running, fighting, and singing karaoke. There's a lot you can do with these, but there are two that I do need to talk about because they're so addictive and act as the main aspects of money making. Well, aside from a certain mechanic involving someone called Mr. Shakedown, I'm talking about the real estate and cabaret clubs. Well, I say the real estate and cabaret clubs are side content, but they're content that you're going to have to interact with in order to farm money to upgrade Kiryu and Majima. Let's start with the real estate portion first, since that has a lot less work to it. Basically, when you're Kiryu, you get to the point in the story where you have to buy properties in Kamurocho, and those properties will earn you more and more money, which you can use to invest in more businesses. There are quite a few districts that you can get in Kamurocho, and you'll be competing against other real estate owners, the 5 billionaires. I'll get to them in a second, but once you buy a property, you can invest more money into it, and you'll want to do this since they deliver more and more profit. You'll need to find investors, managers, and security for your businesses, since they can allow you to upgrade your properties, match how much money you can make, and for security, well, if you're out on the streets and you get into a fight in those streets, they'll actually join you in the fight. Managers help you earn more money, and don't worry, you'll get these necessary characters when you complete sub-stories in the game, like Nugget. You remember Nugget, right? The one that Colonel Sanders missed the memo on? Yeah, he's a manager for this game! But you're probably wondering about the 5 billionaires. Well, they're bosses you fight against in the game, and boy oh boy! You want to do this. Not only with each boss you take down, you gain control of their section, but you also unlock parts of your abilities for your fighting styles. Heck, in order to access the legend style for Kiryu, you have to do the Real Estate Royal storyline, and trust me, you want it! As a special style, you'll find it's faster than Brawler and stronger than Rush. You'll have quite a few options with heat actions, as well as, not to mention, all the counter moves. It's not completely broken, but you do have an advantage while using it that you don't get with the other styles. As for the Cabaret Club, there's a bit more hands-on approach since you're running clubs, and I'm not going into a deep dive of all the mechanics, but it's extremely deep to get into. It's also very addictive, and much like with Kiryu, Majima's goal is to take over the club scene in Sotenbori, so he can get more money. You have to recruit girls to join your club and manage who's the best girl for the job, as well as manage their shifts and even their hairstyles.
I like your cut, G.
But again, it's worth for all the money, the additional boss fights, and of course...
You stupid motherfucker!
This is Majima's Mad Dog style. It's a difficult style to use well because it's unhinged by its very nature. Once you enter this savage mode, Majima will start careening around on his own, so be sure to steer him properly and only hit heavy attacks once you reach an enemy, because if you're just mashing heavy attacks, he'll whiff and lose his combo of strikes and you'll have to start again. It's still a good style to have, and it does hit pretty hard. So basically, the side content gives you a lot of stuff, and it's pretty fun and addictive to do. There's a reason why I keep coming back to this game. Well, that and the women's wrestling ring. It's a good way to make money!
Actually, you never really explained Mr. Shakedown, so I guess I'll have to do it. The mechanic involving Mr. Shakedown is that if he beats you, he acts as sort of a bank for your money. You know, that collects interest. You know, he's kind of a bloodsucker, which can build up really high and super fast, as he continues to, you know, shake down other people harder than the game industry did when they, you know, released The Last of Us Part 2. Except with The Last of Us Part 2, it wasn't really a money shakedown, it was just a, you know, a shaking of the soul. It's recommended that if you can't beat him fair and square, just pretend you're in America on the Nickelodeon show and express your Second Amendment rights. That's all. You know, you also literally just told me that you beat him the other night too. I'm gonna have to press X to doubt on that.
日曜なんて大嫌いです。さてと。
I've seen a lot of people talk about this game, but not a lot of people who talk about the music. I'm sure people know about Baka Mitai, or 24-Hour Cinderella, or Friday Night. No, not that Flash game. And don't get me wrong, those are really good songs, but I think we need to talk about some of the other music in the game, since it shouldn't go unappreciated. Like, take the song Tusk, one of the most reoccurring battle musics in the game. It's a tense battle theme that's catchy and certainly fits the Rush combat system. Or some of the boss themes, like when you fight against Kuze.
そうかい。なるようになっちまうもんだな。くぜ
Not to mention the background music whenever you do your sub-stories is pretty catchy too, I suppose. I mean, I've been using it in my videos for a while, so I'm sure you've heard it. Part of the reason why I appreciate the game most of the time as well is I find it so refreshing that these tunes are always playing when they can, and there is a lot of music. The composer of this is Hidenori Soji, and I gotta say, the guy's got a lot of talent. Even more so when you realize that every combat style has its own theme music, so you're never really stuck with the same theme unless you got some very important fights going on. It really adds on how different each style is, and the tunes do get you in the groove for how you want to fight in that specific style. The music for tense and more dialogue-heavy scenes also adds to the atmosphere of the game and really denotes how these characters should be feeling with certain events happening in the story. But yeah, Bakamitai and Friday Night are on my usual musical playlists, so...
How dare you! How dare you not mention Kiryu's Legend theme! Where they remade Receive You from Yakuza 1!
Bit Wars. 64 bits. 32 bits.
16 bits, 8 bits, 4 bits, 2 bits, 1 bit. やっぱたまらんな。
I unfortunately need to be a little negative here. Now, while I've stated multiple times that graphics are not hit or miss with me, so long as you don't do what Cyberpunk did, I can usually just focus on a game. And don't get me wrong, Yakuza 0 is not a bad looking game. Hell, for a game that's about 4 years old at this point, it looks really damn good. But there's some cracks that I do want to point out. Nothing really major, mind you, but still some things that should be pointed out. I still think the game is amazing and fun looking, but you can easily tell where most of the animation budget went with this game, and where some of them decided to go into nightmare fuel! Yeah, in the non-essential dialogue scenes, I came to notice that there were a lot of times where the characters would just open their mouths up and down as if they were puppets. Really, my complaints more or less refer to the animations in the game because there's a lot of recycling in the game's animations. At least in the more standard animations, and like I said before, most of the animation budget went towards the heat actions, and frankly that's where most of the budget should go. But even considering that, there are some heat actions that are recycled well, but there are so few and far between that I didn't notice until actually really doing a deep dive. And even then, looking at future installments of the series that have the same combat mechanics, you can tell they put even more effort into the animations, which I can say, that's pretty amazing. But when you see the cracks, they are there.
Game over, man. It's game over.
So, here we are, at the end of the road, the part where I would probably suggest that you guys go play this game, and frankly, I don't see why you wouldn't get this game. It's on a plethora of platforms, and often goes on sale, so get it, buy it, sell your kidney for it. That was a joke, mind you, do not actually sell your kidney. Why are you still here? Do it! If your computer needs to give your wallet the good old suck as a tribute for Lord Gavin, then let it. Get the game! It's awesome! And your balls will finally drop. Even if you physically never had balls to begin with. All hail Lord Nugget!